So normally people talk about ideas that they want to get out there and they want to champion and get other people to believe. And I am not going to do that today. This is possibly the most self-indulgent intellectual exercise I've ever engaged in. But there's an idea I had, and it was bad. It was a bad one. This is my cat, Henry. But I so delighted in thinking about all of the consequences of implementing the idea that it just, it's just fun to think about how people would respond. So here's the idea. Everyone should be able to sell their vote. You can sell everything else almost. Why not sell your vote? Again, I think this is a bad idea. But let's just think about if it were true. First of all, in order for this to even work a little bit, you would have to have a publicly traceable account of each vote. So if you sold your vote to somebody else, you would see your vote, and everyone could see it, go to that other person. And if that other person sold their vote and your vote to a company, then you could track the trail of every single transaction of vote. I'll get to why that's important later. But I think if you think about this just superficially, the first thing you think about is, well, this is a terrible idea because it will just inject more money into politics, and it will make businesses and people that have tons of money be able to have greater say in the political process than they already do. So why would you ever want that to occur? And I gotta say, this isn't a bad point. But just indulge me for a second and think through some of the interesting ramifications. Now, first of all, there would be a marketplace in terms of the value of a single vote. And that is going to be dependent on the market. So a Democrat living in New York or California, their vote is almost worthless because Democrats are going to win most races in New York and California. Likewise, a Democratic vote or a Democrat voting democratically in an election is worth way less to the Democrats than it is to Republicans, right? So if a Republican can get a Democrat vote by buying it, that could have significantly more value to the Republicans than obviously if you're buying someone's vote who's already going to vote on your side. I mean, that seems like a pretty obvious point, but oh, great. Sorry, that was my mailman. Mailwoman. So think about all of the variables, essentially, of how a vote could gain or lose value. Right? And so you think the most valuable vote is going to be in an incredibly tight race, where you have an independent or someone from the other side, their vote can be bought and switched to your side. And then the least valuable vote, like I was saying, is someone who's already going to vote for you, living in a state or a county in which it is almost sure that you're going to win anyway. So here's some of the other interesting things that I think would happen. One, it would make certain votes in certain areas, and I think a lot of them would be in the more rural areas of the country, fairly valuable. And that might actually create some type of incentive for people to live there, depending on its value. It would also, I think, greatly alter how money is spent in politics. So imagine all of the hundreds of millions of dollars that are wasted every single election on stupid commercials that, for all intents and purposes, are not having hardly any effect. I think, I haven't deeply looked into the research, but I remember seeing a study showing that there is very little effect in terms of political advertisements in changing people's opinion, which seems obvious. I mean, it almost seems silly to think about a commercial being able to change your political point of view. And so instead of giving hundreds of millions of dollars to advertising companies, television channels, magazines, that money would be more easily funneled directly to people. Like, imagine every single presidential election, both political parties spending, God, I can't even remember what it's up to. Let's just say it's $500 million. And instead of, and that just goes directly to people. Now, the downside of this, of course, is that you want people to vote without thinking about money. You want people to vote their principles. And so it seems contaminatory to influence people's decisions with money in this way, right? This is essentially kind of like a legal bribe. I'm just going to give you money to vote for me. And I think this is a very good point. But how many people would really change their vote? I don't think you could pay me a certain amount of money to vote for someone I really didn't like, or a political party I really didn't believe in. I'd feel terrible about it. Now, I would sell my vote to a candidate that I did believe in, and that would be worth a certain amount of money. Not as much, of course. But this is where I think the traceability of the vote is very important. So if I sold my vote to somebody who I did not actually believe in, and that was posted publicly, like, let's just say, let's just use the last election of Trump and Hillary Clinton. And whoever you despise more, just think of them. Think of what money it would take for you to vote for Hillary Clinton, what money would it take for you to vote for Donald Trump. But then also having your name forever associated, like anyone in the world could look up a public database and see that Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, you sold your vote to one of them. I think that would actually be a fairly significant disincentive for people that are either ideologically committed in their heart, or then people that are just socially ideologically committed into this kind of political presentation. Either one, it would create a social shaming system that I think would keep people from totally selling out, or at least keep a certain percentage of them. Again, boy, what great sociological data that we could get. There's all the social psychology studies where they run dictator games, or all of these other little behavioral economics games where they look at value and how it affects people's behavior and how they operate in a system. And just imagine running this system in a country for 50 years and all of the things that you could learn about how people behave in relationship to ideology and money and tribalism and social political presentation and all of those things. It'd be incredible. More downsides. Here's more downsides to this. Half the country votes right now. I think there's like 320 million people. Obviously, not all of those people are eligible to vote, but let's just say 300 million people. So 150 million vote, 150 don't. Now imagine those 150 million people that don't vote are entirely politically unmotivated, don't care. Suddenly their vote's worth, I don't know, $5. And they can just put their vote on an eBay-like marketplace and sell it to the highest bidder. And so suddenly what happens is your vote is suddenly worth way less. Because if you're one of 150 million people, your vote is worth a certain value. But if you're one of 300 million people, your vote's worth even less. And so all of those non-voting people, if they then started voting, it would actually have a negative effect on the actual say of well-informed people. That I think is the best argument. And when I hear people wanting everyone to vote, it is a strange argument, because the more people that vote, the less your vote is worth. And so, in a strange economic sense, and I could hear some economists make this argument, although it doesn't make psychological sense, I don't think, that a voter would be predisposed to try to disincentivize as many people to vote as possible, because you would want your vote to be as valuable as you could. And anyway, if you're 1 in 100 people, your vote is incredibly valuable. You have a huge impact, or could have a huge influential impact on that election. Are there other interesting things to think about this? Anyway, I just think that how value is assigned, like the kind of the amazing thing about money is that it makes value concrete. It solidifies it into something that's measurable. And when you do that, it takes the ambiguity out of a lot of everyday situations. I wrote an article a long time ago just on the difference between kind of the favor economy and the money economy, where interpersonal relationships sometimes operate off this idea of favors, like, oh, I owe you one. But it's never clear how you translate value across domains in the favor economy, right? So like, if I help you move, and I help you move a piano up to your second floor apartment, and then you're like, hey, I owe you one, and then you show up a week later with a Pizza Hut pizza and a case of beer, and we're like, hey, we're even, right? Like, trying to track the value of favors across domains isn't easy. I mean, that obviously to me is not comparable, but you see these problems creep up, I think, especially in relationships, where it's like, let's say the woman feels like she cleans way more than the man and confronts him about this. And the man is like, well, yeah, but I fix everything around the house. I fixed the plumbing last month, and that was a certain type of labor, right? But and what's that worth? What's going through metaphorically and literally shitty work in terms of dealing with plumbing? How many house cleanings is that worth? Like, there's no good system to do this kind of cross-domain value. And so money is just an easy way to cut through all of these ambiguity, because when you have these fields of ambiguity, people tend to use them to their advantage. They tend to view their work as more valuable, and the people around them's work is less valuable. And so there gets to be this off-kilter imbalance that occurs in those ambiguous situations. So with money injected into the political process, there would be a clarifying effect that I think would be interesting and measurable, and would clear up a lot of this, some of the ambiguity. Here's another interesting facet of this, is that you could have companies set up, that are essentially, let's say, the Democratic Party, or not even the party itself, but some third, offshoot sets up some kind of bank that's buying votes, and they advertise themselves as a Democratic organization, but they're actually a Republican organization, or vice versa. Right? And so then there's this ambiguity around, if I sell my vote to someone, are they going to use it in the way that they're advertising, or are they actually tricking me and are going to flip the vote? Right? And so then it would essentially require some kind of reputational system that would develop, in terms of that you would have to be able to identify companies that were competing for your vote and see who they actually are and who they actually represent. And just like you've got top-rated sellers on eBay or Amazon and all these different selling networks, what would emerge would be some kind of reputational trust rating system where you could be sure that these people are going to vote the way that they're advertising, because that would be part of the pitch, right? There, you could imagine, an organization set up and let's say it just believes in all of the things that you believe in, right? And it's saying, hey, guess what? We'll buy your vote. We'll buy it for $25. We'll vote exactly along these ideological lines that that you believe in, and we'll do it consistently, right? So it's like, we won't forget to go to the election that day. We'll just bank them all, and then as a organization enact their will in a way that maybe is more informed, right? Because this is the other interesting thing, I think, is that individual people are not very informed when they vote. And you can imagine a political organization, like what is it, Cato, the Brookings Institute, across the political spectrum, you could imagine these think tank organizations that have a more intimate knowledge about how to enact the change that they want to see. And if you are politically aligned with those organizations, maybe they'll do a better job voting than you would. They're certainly more informed. I'm not a well-informed voter. Like I think about politics. I listen to national politics. I pay almost no attention to local politics. When it comes time to vote, I vaguely read about certain issues. It generally doesn't interest me that much. And I'm always struck with the fact that as I'm sitting there with this ballot, looking through all these choices, that, this is a fairly inefficient process. Like, I shouldn't be making decisions here. And there are a lot of decisions that I make where I look at a social context, and I find the people that I think are intelligent and that know way more about something than I do. And then I just pay attention to their thoughts on that particular subject. And what that gives me is I don't have to learn in-depth knowledge about everything, because there's just only so much time. And so seeking out intelligent people, intelligent organizations, and then, again, through your own discernment, trusting them that they can make a better decision in certain cases than I can. I think we do that all the time. I follow people who are evolutionary biologists, who are social psychologists, who are cognitive linguists, who are behavioral economists. They have a way more in-depth knowledge of their field than I do. And there are a few people that, I just generally watch them for a while, know that they're intelligent people. They might not be right all the time, but it's just a good indicator of aligning myself in certain fields without actually doing the work. And this might sound lazy, but I think that's a great approach, because we are faced with this issue of being swamped with information. The internet is just constantly producing information, and it's overwhelming. And so part of intelligence, I think, is being able to select the important information out of the noise, but then also being able to select people and organizations out of the noise that seem to be operating intelligently. And that you really can't operate, you can't do it all. You can't know it all. And hopefully what's happening is that there is this adaptation, that we are creating this particular environment, swamping ourselves with information, and that intelligence is going to get a greater ability to deal with this new problem that we've generated. Anyway, so that's my bad idea. I go back and forth in convincing myself that there are some bright sides to it, and but generally, I think the sanctity of a vote, the removal of it from any consideration of money at all, is a good thing. But I wish I could. I wish there was another alternate universe. I don't believe in the simulation idea of reality, but if you could simulate what's happening now and run the experiment of, can you sell your vote, and how would that change our political decisions starting from 1776 all the way up to today? I think it would give you some pretty fascinating information about human beings.